Hi friends, so a misty morning in Tasmania this morning. That's Nandi in the background. He's got his little bird be safe collar on. No, we don't like to dress up our cats. Um, so one thing that I've noticed, and it sort of inspires me, is that over the last few years, a bit like the 100th monkey theory in a way, veganism is sort of popping up all over the place. And it is not reliant on any one individual to instruct people to go vegan. It's not been due to any gatekeepers in various animal welfare type groups. It's had nothing to do with any academics or basically anybody who wants to be a gatekeeper. It's got nothing to do with particular egos that are involved. It's been something that's organically sprung up, and by itself, often it's just been somebody has seen some information online about, say, the dairy industry, which is something that happened to me about 14 years ago. And that's when I decided, well, that's totally unacceptable. If that's what happens as a regular thing in the dairy industry, then that's outrageous, and I can't participate in that anymore. And I sort of thought, well, it just became an across-the-board decision. I thought, well, if that's what happens in the dairy industry and that's seen as acceptable, this kind of welfare nonsense that is really just, if applied to humans, would be considered torture, I thought, well, I have to abandon the whole thing. It's obviously something that is widespread throughout other industries. And so I just became vegan overnight, really. And I really hadn't even thought about veganism, and I had been vegetarian in my life, but vegetarianism still involves a lot of violence, eating dairy and eggs and wearing leather and wool and all that kind of thing. And I'd been vegetarian on and off even, so I hadn't even sort of stuck to that. So becoming vegan just happened sort of overnight for me, because it was sort of a rude awakening in a way, just to see some details about what really happens in the dairy industry, not these sort of happy animal, happy cow business that you see today by actual industry and advertisements and the like. So, but I was watching this Instagram account today. He's a raw vegan. It's called Hear Me Raw. And he was walking through an area, and he was talking about, he was trying to encourage people to go vegan, and he said, we don't want to participate in the rape of other animals. And he said, and that's basically what we're doing if we're, eating dairy. And he sort of said, anybody who's vegetarian, please think about it. And he said, we don't need to exploit these animals to be healthy. And it's just, and he basically pointed out how perverse it is, really, to be raping mother cows and taking their children. It was a very short, he didn't even really go into much detail, but it actually, it was just coming from his heart. And I just thought, well, isn't this great? This is sort of like, and you see more and more of that, just people, individuals that have nothing to do with groups, or they're not following any individual online. They're just vegan, and they have the ethics of it, which is the most important reason to be vegan. And that's why it was coined in 1944, that word, by Donald Watson, because he realized vegetarianism didn't go far enough, and he realized that we just shouldn't be using these animals. If we're vegetarian and we sort of see that eating meat is not okay, then, there's a lot of more violence actually in the dairy industry and in the egg industry. The dairy industry is a horror story. And in the end, they all wind up in the same slaughterhouse, even if they're on these happy, so-called happy mom and pop farms, and they still have their children taken from them and so forth. So, but anyway, it was, inspiring to see somebody, who really got it, who really understands the ethics of veganism. And there's a lot of people like that now, a lot of people. The truth has a way of getting past any gatekeepers, whether they be industry and advertising, or whether they be individuals that are they're kind of glory hounds in quotes, trying to sort of be gatekeepers of a certain ideology or whatever, or they're trying to sort of, in some ways, big note themselves. It gets away from all those people and has got a momentum of its own, and that's what we're seeing today. That it has a momentum of its own. It's gotten past the so-called, the welfare groups that that call themselves animal rights groups, but they're promoting morally acceptable ways. They promote this idea that it's morally acceptable to use animals as long as it's done humanely, as long as they're treated nicely, which is just a complete nonsense, and it's a myth. There's no such thing as humane animal use, and even if there were, it would still be wrong, because if we believe animals matter, and most of us do, then we wouldn't do to our cat, a cat whom we live with, or a dog whom we live with, what we're doing to these other animals in these farms, whether they be industrialized farms or factory farms, or on these so-called happy animal farms, these happy mom and pop farms. We just wouldn't do the kinds of things to, these so-called family members, dogs and cats, who are also, by the way, viewed as property in society. So I won't get into that particular discussion, but we need to expand our respect for the non-human animals that we consider family members. They're sentient. We can see they're sentient, and expand that understanding to all the animals that we are on our plates and that we wear on our backs and that we use or view as entertainment in zoos and circuses and all that kind of thing. Animals in experiments, when there's alternative methods are being developed and could be employed if we had the will, but because animals are property, we think, well, why not? We can use them, so we'll just keep on using them and torturing them and killing them. That understanding we have about the animals whom we love, like dogs and cats, we can expand that to other animals, because the only difference between those animals we love, the dog or cat whom we love and see as just the most wonderful being, whom loves us as well, there's no difference between those particular animals, that species, and all those other species. If we had an individual relationship with any of those species who are being killed every day, and there's 200 million land animals every day plus, and many, many more times that aquatic animals, they're being killed every single day of the year. And all those animals have individual, personalities. It's just we never get to experience that. But they're all individuals on this planet, and every single day, 200 million plus, like I say, all those animals just are tortured and killed for trivial reasons. We don't even need animal products at all to survive. If we can expand that understanding and realize, and don't forget that aquatic animals, just because we don't recognize any emotions on their face if they have a different inner world, doesn't mean that they're less sentient than all these animals whom we fetishize. It doesn't mean anything at all. It just means that they're different, and difference is absolutely acceptable. And as we know, diversity in our human species is also feared. And look what happens to the fear. It turns into violence. Well, the same happens with non-human animals. This fear of or basically exploiting the vulnerable in the case of non-human animals. We don't recognize, they're not like us in quotes, and we think, okay, well, we can do what we want with them. See, it happens, it's across the board, whether it's humans or non-humans. We often vilify and demean diversity, and then they become targets of violence and exploitation. We see it in the human species and the non-human species, except that with non-humans, we kill more non-humans in 4 days than we've killed in the entire human history, and murders and genocide and diseases and so forth. So it's on a massive scale. So anyway, just what I was basically saying about this is that veganism has its own momentum, this ethic, the vegan ethic has its own momentum that has nothing to do with any individual. It has nothing to do with any group. It has nothing to do with any ego. It has its own momentum, and truth always has a way of bypassing all of that. It's not about the messenger, it's about the message. It's never been about the messenger, even if certain individuals have tried to make it about themselves. It's never been about that. Of course, clarity and moral consistency is very important, but it's never been about the messenger, and it's certainly not about these large animal groups that are around either. It's certainly not about welfare and how to find nice ways of torturing and killing animals. It's never been about that. And people are recognizing that. They always people are just naturally realizing through some information, somewhat like I did, just realizing, wow, this is not okay, and we don't need to do this. And they just go straight to veganism. They don't become vegetarian. They don't do all this nonsense of meat-free Mondays and veganuary and fish-free Fridays and flexitarianism and all that nonsense, which is just ridiculous when you think if we know something's wrong, we should just abandon it, right? They don't do that. They just go straight to becoming vegan. And that's what I encourage everybody to do. Don't get into all the, I need to do baby steps and all of that. It's not necessary. It really isn't. And if we know something's wrong, we know it's wrong, and we should just abandon it. Forget all this nonsense of happy, humane animal labels and all of that. Let's just go straight to veganism, and it's be one of the best things we've ever done. It really is. It's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. So, and along with that, because we've created a situation where we have now a lot of animals who are in shelters because we've bred them into existence to be, companions and all of this sort of thing. I'm not going to go into what I think about that. I'm just going to suggest to you, because we've created this mess for them, and I'm talking about dogs and cats and all sorts of animals that we use as pets, in quotes, that we've sort of called pets. And these are the same animals, whom we think of family members and stuff, but a lot of animals are killed in shelters. A lot of animals are abused, lots of them, all over the world, and they're abandoned. They're abandoned, and they have to fight for themselves. They have to survive, and they don't do very well. But there's millions in shelters, and that's because they've been considered property. And when people aren't interested in them anymore, they can't keep them for whatever reason, they're just abandoned in these shelters, and many of them are killed. Completely healthy animals are killed, which is a tragedy. It's a tragedy, and that's why I want to suggest to everybody, if you can adopt, if you have a situation where you can adopt or foster somebody from a shelter, a dog, a cat, a rat, a mouse, a chicken, or whatever, if you can adopt them and give them a secure, loving, safe environment where they can be, psychologically and physically healthy, then please adopt or foster. There's an account on Instagram called Chicago Black Cats, which I mentioned before, and they have about 127,000 followers, and they've just recently decided to foster a little cat who was trapped in Chicago. They have the trap, neuter, and return programs there, and oftentimes they will trap feral cats and then neuter them and then return them to the colony, unless, of course, that cat looks like it could be seen as adoptable. It's able to be sort of adopted out. And so this particular trap, neuter, and return group managed to, in one of the little cats who was only about 2 months old, one of them, they managed to, they thought, well, this little cat is a little ginger cat. He could be probably adopted out, he just needs some fostering. Anyway, they put him in a shelter, but he didn't do very well in the shelter. He was hissing at everybody, and I was very afraid. So the Chicago Black Cat people, is two people, a couple, Andrea and Rich, they decided they would foster this little guy, and he was incredibly frightened when he got to their home, and but after about 3 weeks, he was just completely happy and relaxed, and just a completely different little guy. And they managed to just recently put him into they found a forever safe, loving home for him. They're braver than I, because I'd be a foster fail. I just get way too attached, and it would be very difficult for me to do that. But I would like to be able to do that. We did it once, and that was a foster fail. But I think it's really great if people can do that. To do that is to foster, and it gives these little individuals who love life just like we do, and who didn't ask to be in this mess where they're running around on the streets of Chicago, and they're trying to survive, and they're only like a few weeks old. These sort of foster situations are really, really important, and they just give a life some kind of a loving and happy life to these little guys. So if we can do that, that's a really great thing. And if you can't foster or you can't adopt, maybe support in some ways. No-kill shelters are are best to support no-kill shelters, and to encourage shelters that are into killing animals to become no-kill and to find ways of becoming no-kill. But before you do that, before you go fostering or adopting or supporting a no-kill shelter, please go vegan, because all the animals all those animals, all those 127,000 followers on that Chicago Black Cats account, they all recognize the sentience of that little guy. Marmalade was his name, who was adopted out, who was fostered and adopted by somebody else. They all recognized how his sentience and what a great little guy he is. And those two cats that they have on that account are both individuals, and everybody adores them. And you see the sentience. Well, like I say, there's no difference in the sentience of those animals and how amazing they are, and the sentience of all the other animals that we have on our plates every single day, and we're wearing on our backs, the wool and the leather, and all of that. There's no difference. And all the aquatic animals, they have a different way of expressing themselves. They have a different presentation, but they're still sentient, and they love life just like we do and do not want to die. So let's try and do what we can, to not only, firstly, become vegan. That's the most important thing, and become vegan for ethical reasons, which is what veganism is, and internalize that ethical position and realize that every animal is sentient. Every animal that whether we want to acknowledge it or not, whether it's inconvenient or not for us to acknowledge, they are sentient, and let's stop using them as things, as resources, as property. And then after we become vegan, then find some support in that, and join people who also share those values. So many people now who are vegan, or at least they label themselves as vegan. They call themselves vegan. There's millions, really, millions and millions, and there's millions on the planet. It's exponentially growing. It's growing outrageously fast in Britain, apparently. So, it's unstoppable now. It's unstoppable. So let's just get on that justice train, that non-violence justice train, and be on the right side of history and go vegan. And then let's adopt and foster these little these individuals whose only, they didn't create this mess. We created this mess for them, and they're refugees of domestication. Let's foster and adopt those guys, and do what we can to spread veganism to others. That's all I wanted to say, so thank you so much. Isn't that beautiful, the way the sun is coming through those trees? These are really old, 100-year-old white gums, and I'm trying to sit far away from them because they have a tendency to just drop branches sometimes. So I don't want to be sitting here talking and then suddenly a branch drops on me and that's the end of it. They're really gigantic branches even. These trees are, I'm fairly far away from them, but the base of them is quite large. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click the notifications bell. And please, hit the like button if you like the content. And I always appreciate your comments. Thank you so much for taking the time to make them. And please think about going vegan. Check out howtogovegan.org, my comprehensive vegan resource. So my name's Trisha Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Till next time. Bye for now.